morning. I'm Kenny Polcari, and it is a pleasure to be here today with my friend Dan Labovitz, who I know from the New York Stock Exchange for more than 25 years. And it's a pleasure for me to be here because Dan is working on a very, very interesting topic, subject, an exchange, actually, and it's called the Green Exchange. So join me when I welcome Dan Labovitz and we learn more about the Green Exchange. Dan, what a pleasure for me to be here, and I'm very excited about what you guys are doing.
Thanks, Kenny. I'm really excited to be here, too. So we are in the process of building a brand new stock exchange, one that will be aimed at helping companies who are really serious about becoming green and then being green.
Okay, so just to be clear, becoming green means what to the investment community?
We looked around and we said the world of ESG is kind of confused at the moment.
Right.
You got a lot of standards. You got a lot of people who are trying to figure out how do I measure and manage all of this stuff, and not a lot of clarity.
Right.
So we looked at and we said what's really missing is any emphasis on culture. How does a company conduct its business? How does a company think about itself? And one of the things that exchanges do is they create listing standards that are governance. It's about how does a company govern itself. And so we are creating a mechanism for companies to have a green culture.
Are your mandates or your listing standards going to be different from the ones that currently exist at the New York Stock Exchange or at NASDAQ? And if so, how?
Well, they'll be related to, there are some that are overlap, and then there are some that are unique.
Right.
The overlap one's a company that's going to be listed has to do certain things financially, and the number of stockholders and things like that. That's what New York and NASDAQ do.
Right.
What we're going to do differently is we have governance standards, which are things that the board should be doing, things that the executive management should be doing, and things that the company should be doing to conduct its business differently.
Things that are measurable.
Things that are measurable, things that are about policy and procedure and how they do the process, not necessarily the outcome.
All right, so what's the current state of green investing now? Or is there even a current state of green investing?
Yeah, it's a huge sector of the investment world these days.
Right.
$20 trillion dedicated to companies that are following the E or the S or the G or some combination.
All right, but so define that for me, because it's $20 trillion today in 2022. What was it 5 years ago, and what do you think it's going to be 5 years from now?
So if you go back 10 years, it was $2 trillion. So it's 10 times that.
Okay.
And it's been growing exponentially. And I think what's going to happen is more people are realizing that dollars equal difference.
Right.
And so they're using their dollars to try to make an impact.
Are millennials the only investing group you think that are concerned about climate change, or do you think it spans the whole range? Because look, I'm 60. I'm concerned about climate change.
Well, yeah, it's interesting you mentioned millennials because that is one of the big drivers. It's not the only driver, but it is a big driver. Millennials, remember that $20 trillion?
Right.
That's a generational shift of wealth from baby boomers to millennials. As the baby boomers pass on, that money is going to millennials. And millennials, as a group, care about impact investing. They want to see that their dollars do good work. So it's being driven by the millennials who are concerned.
Right. So what do you think are some of the biggest problems that are facing these investors right now? The fact that you can't measure these results?
There's two problems. There are two main problems. One is that there's so much information out there and none of it is organized in a way that's easy to understand.
Right.
So imagine you're trying to assemble a piece of furniture. You have some parts, you're not sure you have all the parts, and you don't know what you're making, and it's dark. So that's one problem. And the other problem is that if you're an investor and you want to make an impact, you don't really have a way of doing that. If you take an order and you sell it on the New York, 100 shares gets lost in the noise.
Right.
You take that 100 shares and you route it to the Green Exchange.
Right.
The Green Impact Exchange sends a message that some number of shares today traded by people who cared about green.
Companies that want to become environmentally aware or environmentally compliant, right? What are some of the challenges that face those companies? And I suppose it depends on the industry.
Well, it depends on the industry, but it also really depends on what does the company want to be.
Right.
If a company wants to be sustainable, then everything else is solvable. If a company doesn't want to be sustainable, no hope.
I would envision that publicly traded big mega cap U.S. companies want to move in that direction. I would suspect that any one of them that say they don't are not going to be very well received.
It won't be, but there's a very big difference between want to be and say they're going to be.
Right, okay.
And a lot of them will say they want to be, and that's a problem called greenwashing.
Right.
So a company says, it's good for me to be perceived that way, so I'm going to say it, but not actually mean it.
Right. So it's interesting is that term greenwashing, because I didn't really know what it was until I started to read up on what you guys are doing. So so the audience understands, explain what greenwashing really means, because I think it's fascinating and I think it's actually true.
Greenwashing is a nice way of saying the company wants people to think they're doing good things, but doesn't want to spend the time, resources, or effort to actually do those things.
Or help me out. If I'm the CEO of a company and it's 2022 and I said, XYZ companies, we're going to be green and sustainable by the year 2060. I'm not going to be alive in 2060. I can make that promise that that's what it's going to be and then never worry about it. Is that true?
That's true. So here's a way to think about it. The average CEO age right now is 54 years old.
Perfect.
The average CEO tenure is 9 years.
Even better.
So it's 2022.
Right.
And 2050 is the number people use.
Right.
So that's 28 years from now. You do the math.
Right. You're not going to be there.
Right.
So you can all say it. So greenwashing is you kind of say it, you put it out there, everyone feels like you're doing the right thing, and nothing ever gets done.
Right. Or a company may actually mean really well,
right,
but not really have a good sense of what they need to do or what the plan needs to look like.
Right.
Think of it, long-term plans, where do I want to get to?
Right.
Now back up. What do I have to do in the medium term? In order to be able to do that in the medium term, what do I have to do in the short term?
Right.
And we want the company to think about that, to disclose how they're thinking about that, and tell people what their plan is.
So if I buy into that, now here I am, a publicly traded company, and I buy into this, and I want to be listed on your green exchange, and I want people to respect the fact that I'm going green, I want to be sustainable. How are you going to measure whether or not I'm actually buying into the plan, that I'm eating what you're serving?
So a couple of things. One is that the company has to have policies and procedures and board engagement, and we can measure that. We can look at what does the board do and what does the board say, kind of a sentiment analysis. What do they actually say about themselves? At the management level, there are metrics that we can look at. We are not going to tell you you have to follow SASB or TCFD or GRI. You have to pick one of them.
Right.
And you have to justify why you're using that one, but we're not going to tell you which one, because each one has elements that work.
Right. Okay, so what's different, if I understand this correctly, at the New York Stock Exchange or at NASDAQ, they might offer guidance, but they're not holding anyone's feet to the fire. You, in fact, the Green Exchange would end up holding my feet to the fire.
Exactly. Right now, there are general governance standards, right, but they're focused on generalities. We're looking at a specific area, green impact. Do you, as a company, have a plan to start out where you are, become sustainable, stay sustainable?
Right. There's not a disadvantage to trading on the Green Exchange. If I want to buy and sell XYZ, there's not a disadvantage. I'm not doing my client a disservice by sending order flow to the Green Exchange in terms of my ability to execute, the ability to have pricing improvement, all that stuff is the same.
Exactly. We don't see a downside. If you send your order to the Green Impact Exchange, you're sending that message, but you're still getting the same execution quality, you're still getting the same options, it's part of the national market system, et cetera.
So, Dan, we were talking about a company trading on the Green Impact Exchange, but there's actually a real subtle difference to what you want to do. You want the company to actually list on the Green Impact Exchange, not necessarily giving up their current listing, but having a dual listing. So explain that so everyone understands.
Sure. So a dual listing means you're paying listing fees to two different exchanges.
Right.
And somebody might say, well, why would I want to do that?
Exactly.
I knew that was your next question.
Right.
And the answer is that there's a bragging right, I'm committed, and somebody else who's not listed here is not committed. So that's one aspect of it,
okay,
is that you're saying I'm taking on a credible commitment that other people aren't taking on. The second thing is that green investors, that money, that $20 trillion that's earmarked, is now available to you to do the things that you need to do to make your green transition, because going green is not cheap.
Okay, so where are you in that exchange process with the SEC? Are you months away? Are you years away? Are you knocking on the door?
I would say that within a year, we should be where we want to be. We've started the process. We've reached out to the SEC. We're having some initial meetings. The next step is to file our SEC registration application,
right,
and from there it's in their hands.
And what typically, just so people understand, that process takes months after you file the application.
Yeah,
they got to consider it.
I would say it's a year process, and in the meantime, a lot of what we're doing is going out and talking to issuers. And frankly, an issuer who wants to join us may have some homework they need to do before they could list anyway.
Right.
So if we're out talking to people and we say, here are the things you need to do, here's the homework, this gives them a chance to do the homework. And when we're ready, they're ready.
What actually gives you, what sets you apart? Why can you create this exchange?
It's a great question. I think to start with, we have select in an area that's not easy to work in. You know that building and running an exchange is not an easy task, and it's not something just anybody can do.
Right.
So we have done two things. One, we've raised money from investors to begin this process. And the second thing is we have assembled what I consider to be a dream team of people who have deep experience building and running actual exchanges, particularly the New York Stock Exchange.
Right.
Our team includes Lou Pastina, who used to run the trading floor at the New York.
Right.
Charlie Dolan, who was the CEO of one of the specialist firms that traded on the floor. Jim Buckley, who was the chief regulatory officer of the National Stock Exchange, and on and on. So we feel like we have assembled a team of people that has a very unique skill set.
Right.
And there aren't a lot of us out there.
Right.
So I think when you put that together with the funding and the idea, I think we really have a strong shot at this.
And so do you really think that a green exchange, or the opportunity to have a green exchange where people can go and vote with their dollars, that it's going to actually change the climate conversation?
I believe it will. And I want to point back to that vote with your dollars thing right now, because we've talked a couple of times about investors not having a voice.
Right.
And I think it is so important for people to understand that in order for companies to be incentivized to change, you have to talk to them in the language that they understand, and that is about capital and about market reaction and market price and things that investors can influence if they get aggregated in a large enough group.
And I would imagine if it really picks up steam and investors really start to vote with their dollars, it's going to be much clearer to all these companies that are dragging their feet. They better jump on board.
Our hope is that we go from, are you going to be on the green exchange, to why aren't you on the green exchange?
Yeah, I think that's actually a great tagline. If people want to learn more about the green exchange, or if they want to get involved, they just want more information, how are they going to do it?
Well, first of all, they can reach out to us on our website, thegix.com.
Okay.
GIX for Green Impact Exchange.
Very good.
So it's www.thegix.com. Or they can reach out to us once they're on the website. They can reach out to us. We'd be happy to talk to anybody.
Listen, thank you very much. This was really a fascinating conversation for me, and there's so much more to learn, I'm sure. But I look forward to watching you guys as you kind of push this through and grow. And I expect to come back and have another conversation with you.
I'm thrilled we had this conversation. I look forward to more of them as we continue to grow.
My pleasure. Thank you very much for joining us today, learning more about the Green Exchange.